Well, good morning out there, everybody in internet land. My name is Brian Trippett. I am the Front Porch Conservative. Welcome back again to Front Porch Brunch, our Saturday morning gathering where we look at the news, try to figure out what it means, scratch our heads, and maybe laugh a little bit, or a lot, depending on how silly the news may be. So good to have you back this morning. Good to see everybody here. It is a nice sunny Saturday morning where I am. Chilly, but sunny. I'm very happy about that. We're letting everybody settle into their seats. If you are out there on YouTube, if you're out there on Rumble, if you're out there on Twitter, please send out a message to everybody, your brothers, your mothers, your sisters, your misters, and everybody in between, and tell them to get their butts in here. Send out the link, share it far and wide. If you're not a subscriber to the channel, go ahead and give me that sub. You know you want to anyway. Give me a thumbs up, share the link, do all those things you're supposed to be doing. God love each and every one of you for doing it. Again, my name is Brian Trippett. I am the Front Porch Conservative, and this is Front Porch Brunch, the best Saturday morning news and review show on the internet anywhere, hands down. Why? Because you're the audience and I'm the host. So yes, all that going on right now. We're checking out, letting everybody settle into the room. Got some people watching on Rumble. Hello, you Rumblers over there. God love each and every one of you. Got some people on YouTube. So good to have everybody here this morning. I tell you what, I have had me a wild, wild week already. And it started with the end of this show last Saturday. So I kind of have a unofficial tradition now established, having now done this for going on 7 months now. My gosh, it's hard to believe. And good morning to you, Miss Leanne. Morning, my dear. Mwah. Bloody Marys all around. God love you, woman. So I sort of have an unofficial tradition where I finish the show, I take down all the tabs, I put all my settings back to where they otherwise should be, and then I go grab lunch. Okay, no big deal. That's what I did last Saturday. And I come back to find that my entire live stream of 2.5 hours is struck. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, Daniel Clancy. We're glad to have you here, sir. A tip of the hat in your general direction. But yeah, my live stream had been struck. Why? And good morning to you up in Connecticut. So glad to have you here too. Yeah, my live stream had been struck because Paramount Global had dinged me for a copyright claim saying that I had violated copyright rules. And their big complaint was, that almost 2-minute clip at the end of the show that I played talking about South Park's new episode, Into the Panderverse? They dinged me and said I was in violation of copyright. Well, and it may very well have been. It may very well have been the bots. Hard to say. But and having, being relatively new to all this, I didn't know what to do. So, and I got to thank up in Connecticut because she put me on to Megan Fox, and God love Megan Fox. That woman is a doll baby. If you're not following Megan Fox's work, you need to. She is probably one of the best content creators out there on YouTube. And I'm not saying that because she's friendly with me. She's very good at what she does. So give Megan Fox a follow, give her a sub, subscribe to her locals page, all that good stuff. So I reached out to Megan and I told her what was going on. I said, look, all I did was just play it and I made some comments about it too. Yes, she is. She's a great mom. Absolutely great mom too. So I reached out to Megan. I said, look, I didn't claim ownership of it. I didn't say I created it. I didn't change it in any way, shape, or form. I just simply, played it and commented on it. She said, okay, well, that's covered under fair use. Just appeal the thing. Go out to Nick Rekieta's, website, and, he's got specific instructions on how to handle this, yada, yada, yada. I was like, okay. Now, If you know anything about Nick Rekieta, having been on the internet for about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years now, that man has a voluminous, I mean, just volumes of shorts and videos and live streams. I couldn't find it. But I think I had a good enough idea of what to say to make a very convincing case to appeal, which is what I did. And about 3 days later, Global came back, Paramount Global came back and said, okay, we're going to, remove the copyright thing. We realize now it wasn't a da da da. Like, okay, good. So yeah, I've now gone through my first copyright claim as a social media content creator person thingy. So that was a little bit disconcerting last Saturday. But aside from that, my week has been good. I didn't get to put up as many videos as I would have wanted. I was tired a lot, just very tired. I did my live stream Wednesday with Dr. Larry Swikert, which was fantastic. If you're not following Larry Swikert on the internet or on Twitter, do so. This man is probably one of the most prescient historians of his era, and the man writes like a son of a gun. I mean, good grief. I mean, I said this on the live stream, and I truly do mean it. If I actually took the time to read every title of everything that Larry Swikert has written from the time he was a master's student till now, it'd probably take me a good 10, 15 minutes just to read the titles. And he is he writes for volume. That's the best way I know how to put it. But he was fantastic. He is. He's a really interesting chap. I wholeheartedly agree with that. And up in Connecticut, I mean, thank you so much for putting the word out about that interview. We had a little trouble with the audio, but that was my fault. I finally figured out about 10 minutes in what was going on. After we got that straightened out, phew, that interview just took off. But yeah, it was fantastic. So shout out to Dr. Larry Swikert for stopping by the front porch. He was fantastic. I've got a couple of things I'm twirling around in my head for next week that I'm hoping I can pull off. I'll let you guys know what they are as we get further into the show today. So, yeah, it's been a real interesting week for me. Like I said, not as many videos. I did my live streams and stuff like that. Like I said, just was tired a lot. So, didn't feel real good. But always glad to be putting up content. Always glad everybody's, sticking around. Always glad when everybody's sharing out the links and everything. So, as always, you guys are awesome. You're absolutely fantastic. We are on YouTube this morning. We are on Rumble. We're on Twitter. Hope everybody is spreading the word. I know you guys are because you're just daggone awesome. So let's get into some of what's going on in the world. And I tell you what, domestically, internationally, it has been a fascinating week. You've heard me say it before. The Chinese have a curse that goes like this: may you live in interesting times. Boy, they don't get much more interesting than what we're going through right now. So let's start first with some things going on in Washington, D.C. And have you heard a sound lately? It sounds like feet shuffling toward the door because something interesting has happened ever since Mike Johnson became Speaker of the House of Representatives. And that takes us to our first article from Politico. Kay Granger, Republican, Texas number 12, has announced that she will not seek reelection. Now, a congresswoman from Texas making the decision that she's not going to seek reelection would be one thing, except for a couple of interesting points. Number one, she's in a district that's so red, it's almost ruby. So the odds of her getting thrown out, under normal circumstances, are slim and none. But second of all, she's the chairwoman of the Appropriations Committee for the entire House of Representatives. She is the queen of the College of the Cardinals. Okay? You don't get one plug nickel in federal money for your district as a congressman, but that it doesn't go through Kay Granger's hands. And she just got the chairmanship. Now, under current House rules, as I understand it, she's going to have that committee chairmanship, assuming she wins re-election in 2024. If she ran, she'd have it until 2026 at a minimum. And she's announcing retirement. So that kind of came as a shock to everybody. But then it got just a little bit more shocking as the week went on because of our next headline. Again from Politico. Ken Buck, iconoclastic conservative. Well, that's an interesting description for him. I don't know I'd quite give him that one. He's announcing he won't run for re-election. Republican from Colorado. Now, if the name Ken Buck and Kay Granger happen to sound familiar to you, may I remind everybody that during all this 3-week tumult that ultimately led up to Mike Johnson becoming Speaker of the House, these guys were consistently voting against Steve Scalise, consistently voting against Jim Jordan, and Tom Emmer's nomination didn't even get to the floor. As a matter of fact, John O'Shea, who is a declared Republican candidate for the seat that Kay Granger is giving up, has told various people that he has it on good authority that Kay Granger was going around whipping votes against Jordan and telling people, you vote for him and I'll make you pay for it through the Appropriations Committee. Ken Buck, for whatever reason, was having none of Scalise or Jordan. But now all of a sudden Mike Johnson's in and they are out of there. And as if that weren't interesting enough, here's the coup de grace where this subject is concerned. This is from the Fresno Bee. Headline, first Kevin McCarthy gets tossed to Speaker, now he faces a primary opponent. This article is by a fellow named Tad Weber. We read the following. Kevin McCarthy began his year enduring 15 rounds of voting by fellow Republicans to become the Speaker of the House, a post the congressman from Bakersfield had long aspired to, that ended on October 3rd, when some of those same Republicans summarily dismissed McCarthy with a motion to vacate. Now, McCarthy may be primaried by a Republican candidate who claims to be a truer to former President Trump. David Giglio of Madera Ranchos said in an email announcement to voters on the 20th, deserve an America First Republican fighting for them in Washington and working alongside President Donald Trump to wage war against the corrupt uniparty. Well, to quote the late, great David Brinkley, what are we to make of all this? Well, I got some thoughts on it. And it starts with this one. Money, 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 money. What am I getting at? Real simple. Kevin McCarthy's not Speaker anymore. Some of these people, and one's not even named here, owe their seats in Congress to McCarthy's ability to raise money. He's not going to be Speaker anymore. And while he may still be pretty good at raising money, he can't bring home the bacon to these guys that need him to rely on their seats. They need McCarthy in order to win. McCarthy's not Speaker. He has no favors to dole out to people. So they're realizing, well, now might be as good a time as any to get out. So they are. I think the other thing that factors into this is purely and simply the election of Mike Johnson. Johnson is a much more conservative Republican. I cannot disagree with the analysis that he is a much more conservative speaker than perhaps we've had maybe since Newt Gingrich in the early 1990s. Now, does that mean that I'm going to agree with Mike Johnson on everything? Well, no, probably not. But as I've often said, when I start agreeing with a politician on 100% of everything, I start getting nervous because one of us has a problem, and it's probably me. But I think Johnson, in comparison to McCarthy, is much more conservative. I think much more ideological than his now predecessor. So, yeah, this to me is a very interesting development. Now, it's very early in the season, so to speak. I think as the months roll on, the closer we start getting to 24 and further into 24, you're going to see a slew of retirements start taking place in the House. And it wouldn't surprise me much to see retirements from people who are in very safe Republican districts. But if you look at their voting record against the area that they're in, a lot of people would make the argument that they're not nearly as conservative as the voters that they purport to represent. And I think what you're going to see happen is over time, you're going to see a number of those individuals make the decision to retire. They're looking at the ideological direction of the House of Representatives and they're saying, you know what? I don't think I can do well here, either ideologically or perhaps personally. So these are just a few of the names that have already dropped. The other factor is, much like McCarthy here, I think you're going to see a lot of the very same kind of Republicans I just talked about. You're going to see them get primaried. You're going to see safe Republican House seats get very serious primary challenges. Now, these challenges will be underfunded. They won't have maybe the level of sophistication of the incumbent, whatever, but these people are going to try to outwork them. So keep your eyes on this. I'm just saying going forward, keep your eyes on this because this is going to be a very serious development as the weeks and months go by. You're going to see quite a few retirements and you're going to see quite a few primary challenges, especially on the Republican side. And yeah, you're absolutely right. She's about as rhino as it gets. And since he's back, I will acknowledge his presence in the chat. Larry has returned. Well, how are you, Larry? Are you any less bitter now than you were before? How much of my personality relies on being MAGA? I have no idea. I think frankly it's a rather silly question. Yeah, but hey, you're here. I'm willing to acknowledge you're here. Good morning. I hope that your life is happy. And I hope generally you're more happy than you normally are. But that's my wish. Anyway, hey Larry. So that's going on. And if you want some confirmation, a little bit of confirmation for my theory, let me show you something from the LA Times they've already picked up on. This is an article. Let me find the date when this was written. Yeah, this was written Thursday. Headline says, "Why the fall of McCarthy leaves California Republicans in a tough spot." Well, I would argue it's not just California Republicans. It's a lot of Republicans everywhere. Let's read a little bit of this. Since House Republicans unanimously elected Louisiana Republican Representative Mike Johnson as Speaker last week, the GOP has sought to portray itself as an emboldened party willing to battle President Biden and the Democrat-controlled Senate. But for California Republicans, Johnson's election presents a host of potential problems that could make trying to survive in a deep blue state even harder than it already was. I don't agree with that, but I'll explain why here in a minute. Former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy's ouster is the first of those challenges. McCarthy's fundraising allies have said they will work with Johnson to ensure that money continues to pour into Republican coffers. But Johnson is relatively unproven as a fundraiser, and McCarthy, who pulled in more than $500 million in the last election cycle, jeez, oh Pete, that's a staggering number, rose to the top of his party in part because of his ability to rake in the dough. Okay, I don't dispute that. The loss of McCarthy from upper leadership could have especially dire consequences for California's state Republican Party, which has long relied on him to keep money coming into the Golden State, said Mike Madrid, an anti-Trump Republican consultant who's become a critic of the party. Quote, Kevin McCarthy was the last card holding up the House that we call the California Republican Party. He was the last reason any serious money, was actually moving through the operation. Now that McCarthy is out as Speaker, quote, that money is going to dry up very, very quickly, Madrid added. The state party is going to have a very difficult time keeping its head above water while it's already sinking. Now, I've got some thoughts on this as it relates to the California Republican Party. And I'm probably going to be out of step with a lot of Republicans, but that's okay. I, on occasion, will be. I will make an argument that Kevin McCarthy losing the speakership in the long run is probably one of the best things that happened to the California Republican Party. Now, people are going to hear me say that and they're going to be like, "You've got to be crazy." I mean, I will concede that the LA Times article is right, or this Mike Madrid, this consultant out of California, is correct. McCarthy's not there. He's going to be bringing in less and less money to the California Republican Party, and for a while, it's going to make it tough on them. But I will say this, and here's why I say that this is probably the best thing ever could have happened to the California Republican Party. Look, the California Republican Party is a shell of what it once was. You could say the same thing about the state of California. And the problems in California and in the party go back decades. Okay. That state used to be reliably Republican, probably from the 1950s all the way through the early 1990s. Governorships, not all. I mean, you had some Democrats in there, but at a presidential level, that state was solid Republican. Okay. And there's a lot of things that go into the decline of the Republican Party in general. Okay. But as the years have gone by, that party is a shell of what it once was. And it, like a lot of places around the country, is going to have to make a very interesting decision. And that is, what are they ideologically? Who do they purport to represent? And this is a discussion I had the other night with Dr. Schweikert, and I think it bears repeating, that we are at a point, be it at the national level, at the state level, in the level of our cities and towns, our counties, whatever, where we're going to have to decide what it is we believe in and what it is politically that we're willing to fight for. And for the Republican Party of California, it gets down to this. Do you want to continue to hold on to this old style of Republican politics, which is getting you nowhere, and you have virtually no swing whatsoever in the state capital at Sacramento? You have no influence on presidential elections. Yes, you have a significant number of Republican House seats, but frankly, the Democrats are outmaneuvering you and outworking you. So, I mean, do you want to hold on to that, or do you want to embrace a more conservative, populist sort of message, which I think the people in California, particularly given the demographic makeups, would be much more inclined to support you? I mean, you got a significant population of Hispanics, you got a significant population of different ethnicities that if you craft the right message and you present it the right way, you could draw these people to you, because the Democrats are turning California into a hellhole. I mean, let's just be perfectly blunt. California is almost third world. And what blows my mind is that Gavin Newsom is out there running around as the unofficial presidential candidate of the Democratic Party when he's got a state that is absolutely falling apart from crime, homelessness, loss of jobs, population loss. I mean, everything. And yet Gavin Newsom's out there like, oh man, he's just that great guy, yada yada yada. Bullshit. So yeah, I think Kevin McCarthy losing the speakership is in the long run the best thing could ever happen to the California Republican Party, because now they have to decide what they truly believe in and what they're willing to fight and die for. And if as a result of all this, the California Republican Party becomes more conservative, more populist, and embraces some of the issues and ideas that are taking hold in various other places around the country, I think it could work to their benefit. So yeah, I mean, I think the reporter for the LA Times is absolutely onto something here, but I don't think they're totally getting the whole picture here. Ah, good morning, Miss Gypsy. You're tardy, but we still love you anyway. So let's see what happens. But I see these retirements happening, and I see some of the dynamics behind it, and I think it's just absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Oh, by the way, speaking of political machinations, I don't know if Kevin McCarthy is behind what we're looking at here, but I don't think his feelings are hurt too badly over it. Let me show you something. I almost forgot to mention this one. Remember Bob Good, who is referred to as one of the Gaetz 8? Turns out he's about to get a primary challenge in Virginia, of all places. Now, I don't know that much about Bob Good, other than he's a Republican out of Virginia. He's one of the 8 Republicans that voted to remove McCarthy. And the only other thing I know about him of particular note is that he endorsed Ron DeSantis. Now, is this challenger being brought at the behest of Donald Trump? Is this challenger being brought at the behest of Kevin McCarthy? I have no idea. Couldn't tell you. I just find this fascinating that, he's about to be challenged. This to me is really interesting. And frankly, you know what? Good. Let him be challenged. Hey, he voted again. He voted for removing McCarthy. Don't you want to make sure he's not? No, I want him to be challenged. I want him to have, like every politician, I want him to have to defend what he believes. I want him to have to defend his record. I want him to have to come before the voters of his district and be like, this is what I voted for, and this is why I did it. And let the political free market have its way as much as it possibly can. So no, I mean, you can make an argument. I'm a little bit upset about it, but I'm not all that. I'm not all that torn up about it. I think it's healthy. I think it's absolutely healthy. I want Democrats challenged. I want Republicans challenged. I want everybody challenged. Do it. Get in there and make them dance. Make them dance. So yeah, I find this to be very, very interesting. Very interesting indeed. Well, it is almost 11 a.m. on a Saturday morning. My name is Brian Trippett. I am your Front Porch Conservative. Do me a favor, if you happen to be watching this wherever you are, whether you be on YouTube or Rumble or Twitter or anywhere else, if you're not a subscriber to my channel, please give me a sub. I'm trying to grow this little thing along here and make it happen. So anything that I can get by way of support, I will always take, even if it's from Larry. Just saying. Larry might even be a subscriber to my channel. I just don't even know it yet. If he's not, he ought to be. I love you, Larry. Even though we don't agree on anything, I love you, Larry. Yeah, we're out on YouTube. We're out on Rumble. I see some Rumblers over there. You lurkers. I love every last one of you, even though you lurk. Drop some comments in chat, daggone it. I promise I don't bite too much. But, yeah, and thank you for spreading the word. I'm looking at my Twitter notification. I see y'all been blowing it up already. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I genuinely appreciate that. So let's shift gears just a little bit and talk about Colorado, or as I put in the headline for this stream, the Rocky Mountain High. And frankly, given what's going on out in court, I think they are high. So just to give you an update, for those of you not familiar with what's going on, 6 individuals brought suit against the Colorado Secretary of State to have Donald Trump's name removed from the presidential ballot in the state of Colorado. under what I feel to be the most ridiculous argument imaginable. And that is, he is in violation of the 14th Amendment, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. So I want to give you a little bit of update. And also I found a couple of things that I think are really interesting from a historical perspective. And I want to put them out there, let you guys talk about them, tell me what you think. But let's start with an update from about what's going on with the case. They had a trial, lasted about 1 week, concluded yesterday. So here's the latest update that we've got. Closing arguments in the trial to remove President Donald Trump will be in person on November 15th. So they finished the witness and evidentiary part of it this week. A decision by the leftist judge is expected to be released shortly thereafter. Witness testimony in the trial concluded today. We will know the results shortly after closing arguments are heard on November 15th, 12 days until closing arguments, and discussions with GOP Chairman Representative Dave Williams from Colorado. Okay, that's an update from Laura Loomer. Now, for those of you that are wondering, how in the world could we possibly get here because Trump has not been convicted of anything? I think you're right, dear. I mean, if she does it, I wouldn't be surprised. I'll put it that way. But I want to play you a video that I found that was put together by Brandon Straka, who's the head of the walkaway movement. And because everybody's kind of asking the question, which I've been doing the same thing, how in the world can you use the 14th Amendment to prevent Donald Trump from being on the ballot if he has never been found, guilty of insurrection? So the case that's going to be shown in this video is a little bit different than Trump's, but at least gives you an idea of where some people are going with this. So, folks, do me a favor and take a listen to this.
Stop what you're doing and listen, because the story of Couy Griffin is a story that almost nobody knows, but every American needs to hear. Couy Griffin is the founder of a group called Cowboys for Trump and was also an elected county commissioner in Otero County, New Mexico. Griffin was targeted by the FBI and DOJ for being at the Capitol on January 6th. Griffin never entered the Capitol and never engaged in any violence, vandalism, theft, or destruction. But he was charged with 2 misdemeanors: entering restricted grounds and disorderly conduct. Griffin went to trial and was acquitted of disorderly conduct, but convicted on the trespassing misdemeanor. A nonprofit organization called Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, or CREW,
which, by the way, is part of this lawsuit that's being brought against the Colorado Secretary of State, by the way,
sued to have Griffin removed from office for violating the 14th Amendment to the Constitution by engaging in insurrection. CREW claims to be a nonpartisan watchdog group. Their website looks like this. CREW is funded by George Soros's Open Society Foundations and singer Barbra Streisand's Streisand Foundation. Even though Griffin was acquitted of having any participation in the riot, a New Mexico judge named Francis Matthew ordered Couy Griffin be removed from office effective immediately, ruling that the attack on the Capitol was an insurrection and that Griffin's participation in it disqualified him from office under the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment states, no person shall hold any office, civil or military, under the United States who has engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same. Judge Matthews' decision marked the first time since 1869 that a court disqualified a public official for this reason, and the first time that any court ever ruled that January 6th, 2021 was an insurrection. Because of Judge Matthews' ruling under the 14th Amendment, Couy Griffin will never be allowed to hold public office again for the rest of his life. But targeting a county commissioner wasn't really the goal. The goal was to find a judge who would be willing to remove a person with a January 6th conviction, even a trespassing misdemeanor, from public office and label January 6th an insurrection.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right there. That's a lot to chew through. Now, you can think whatever you want about Brandon Straka and his opinion on this, and that's fine. But it's kind of hard to argue against a lot of that. I'm going to be very curious if this judge in Colorado does rule against Trump and argues that he should be removed from the ballot. I want to hear the justification. Because if this judge does what was done to this gentleman that is mentioned in Brandon Straka's video, this is going to be immediately appealed up to the U.S. Supreme Court. It'll go to the Colorado Supreme Court. They'll probably uphold the judge's decision. And then from there, it's going to go straight up to the feds. Yeah, and that is what somebody was trying to get on the books. We want a precedent. You got a judge in New Mexico that removed a man for basically a trespass charge, who never even entered the Capitol, according to what we're finding out here. Never entered the Capitol. He was just there. But a judge declared what happened on January 6th to be an insurrection, and therefore, because this man had been charged, well, we can't have him holding office. Okay, let's go back for a second. And I know that some of this may be a little repetitive, but forgive me because it bears going over. This is the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. This is Section 3. No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state legislature or as an executive or judicial officer of any state, to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, and given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may, by a 2/3 vote of each house, remove such disability. Now, that I'm not sure of. I am not sure of that part, to be perfectly honest. This gentleman may have. But if he has at this time, I'm not aware of it. But if somebody can find it, throw it in chat. Let's talk about it. We'll put it up on the screen. We'll take a look at it. Yes, and see, this is why I love my audience, because y'all are you're that good. You're just that good. But that's Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. So I was listening this morning to a live stream from earlier this week by Nick Rekieta and a gentleman named Joe Lehrman, who runs a channel called Good Logic, LAWGIC. And Joe Lehrman has been covering the Colorado trial now for the whole week. And by the way, another very sharp content creator. Give Good Logic a follow if you're not already. He's a sharp dude. They both are, actually. Rekieta's just crazier. Yeah, see? Yeah, Joe Lehrman's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. But Nick Rekieta brought up a very valid point. Why is this case not being tried in federal court? Why is this being tried in a state court? Yeah, that's right. Trump would be on a state ballot, but is this not a federal question? And, just various things like that. There's a lot of reasons why I don't think this trial, frankly, should have ever seen the light of day. Okay. The judge is biased because of various contributions that she's given to various organizations previous, which we could get into if we wanted to. I'm just mentioning it in passing. The legal theory behind all this is just, to me, crazy. This is a Civil War amendment. But in that vein, let's take a look at the history on this. And I found this, ironically enough, on the University of Minnesota's website. And it's an article that was written for their law school. I'd have to go back and look at who the author is, but I want to delve into one section of it. And this deals with post-ratification of the 14th Amendment. Now, I am no expert on constitutional law, but I know enough history to realize when a constitutional amendment is passed, there's normally enacting legislation that follows it to sort of flesh out how do we enforce this? What does it mean practically? What are the circumstances where this applies? So I want to go to a section of this article written for University of Minnesota's law school because I think this is really interesting. So let me get this pulled up. The section is entitled "The First Ku Klux Klan Act and Zebulon Vance." A year after Griffin's case, and that was a case in the state of Virginia, about 1869, Congress took action to enforce Section 3 more generally. In response to white supremacist violence and voter intimidation throughout the South, Congress enacted the first Ku Klux Klan Act, also known as the Enforcement Act of 1870, to protect voting rights recently guaranteed by the 15th Amendment. Two sections of that statute focused on removing ineligible officials who might be obstructing black voting. Section 14 of the Act said that the federal prosecutors had a duty to bring a quo warranto actions against state executives and judges covered by Section 3. Quo warranto, literally by what warrant, was a common law writ challenging an office holder's right to hold his position. Section 14 of the Enforcement Act also provided that any quo warranto actions should receive priority on the docket of a federal court. Lastly, Section 15 of the Enforcement Act declared any person who knowingly held an office while ineligible due to Section 3 was guilty of a misdemeanor and subject to a year in prison or a $1,000 fine. The Ulysses Grant administration responded by filing quo warranto actions and bringing indictments under the Klan Act. The best information of these proceedings come from Tennessee, where both types of cases were brought against the state attorney general and 3 state Supreme Court justices. One of the ineligible justices resigned, but the others remained, and the actions against them were dismissed once Congress granted broad Section 3 amnesty in 1872, which is one of the provisions of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, that amnesty may be given by a 2/3 vote of both houses. Elsewhere in the South, the record of the administration's enforcement effort is sketchy and merits some research. In many instances, the relevant official may have simply quit rather than risk criminal sanctions, and a resignation would not have typically left behind traces. Nevertheless, there is one reported Section 3 criminal case from the Federal Circuit Court in North Carolina and one newspaper report in Virginia on the dismissal of an ineligible postmaster. Okay. This sort of goes to what a lot of people have been saying about this. And this is Mike Davis's argument from the Article 3 Project. The only way that you could have Trump removed from the ballot vis-a-vis Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is you have to have him proven guilty of insurrection by a court of law, and then it be enforced by this law, the Enforcement Act 1870, which means somebody brings a quo warranto warrant to have, Trump taken out if he were still the sitting president. But in this case, they're trying to do it before he ever gets on the ballot. So this, to me, is fascinating. They're taking this case to Colorado State Court. It's a federal issue. Trump has not been found guilty of insurrection. Trump hasn't even been charged with insurrection, and they're trying to remove him from the ballot. As far as I'm concerned, this case never should have seen the light of day. And Gypsy, you may be right. I predict Michigan's the next to take Trump off. Brandon's crew very worried about Michigan. Yeah, Biden and his people are very worried about Michigan. And there's another good point. The Muslim population in Michigan turning on Joe Biden. Could be. Could be. So yeah, this case in Colorado is absolutely just mind-bogglingly stupid as far as I'm concerned. It genuinely is. However, not all cases being brought under this specious legal theory are very well holding up. I said that this is ironic that I found this article at the University of Minnesota Law School's website. Well, it turns out the Minnesota Supreme Court is having nothing to do with this nonsense. Now, let me back that up, explain that. They actually have a case in front of them right now, much like Colorado, but if the people who brought the case in Colorado thought they could get the same result in Minnesota, I don't think that's going to work. Take a look at this. This is from the Gateway Pundit. Minnesota State Supreme Court Justice dresses down leftist lawyer working to keep Trump off the 2024 ballot. The Minnesota Supreme Court on Thursday held a hearing on whether Trump can be blocked from the 2024 ballot. 8 Minnesota voters filed a lawsuit citing the 14th Amendment to keep Trump off the ballot. A leftist lawyer appeared before a Minnesota Supreme Court on Thursday to argue the state has the authority to block Trump from the 2024 ballot. The legal theories are based on Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution's 14th Amendment, which states public officials who have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the U.S. may be disqualified from public office. Trump has not been charged with engaging in insurrection or rebellion against the U.S. 5 of the Minnesota justices, 4 of whom are Democrats, appeared skeptical that states can decide whether Trump can appear on the ballot. 2 of the justices recused themselves from the case. Chief Justice Natalie Hudson sharply criticized the leftist lawyer's arguments and said, quote, "This is a national matter for Congress to decide." Justice Hudson continued, "So should we do it even if we could do it and we can do it?" She also argued that if states had the power to block a person from the ballot, it would create chaos. Similarly, the 14th Amendment lawsuits are being fought in states across the nation. The 14th Amendment trial to boot Trump from the ballot in Colorado began this week by a group of voters who filed a lawsuit. Yeah. Now, before some of y'all leftists out there who are going to watch this video later think that a bunch of Republican judges up in Minnesota are poo-pooing your political theory, your legal theory here, may I respectfully point out the majority of the Minnesota State Supreme Court is constituted of Democrats. And you've got a Democrat Chief Justice of the Minnesota Supreme Court looking at this lawyer going, "Why are we even here? This is a national issue for the Congress to decide." Now, I'm not necessarily laughing because I'm getting the result I want or don't want. That's not my point. But the point is, even reasonable-minded Democrats are looking at this legal theory and they're going, "Are you guys crazy? The hell's the matter with you guys? You can't keep him off the ballot. You can't use a state court to keep him off the ballot. This is a national election." So I find all this to be fairly interesting. It's like, I mean, and I do think Gypsy's right. I think the next step is going to be Michigan. So keep your eye. We're going to keep an eye on this. Now, if Laura Loomer is correct, what she's hearing, that closing arguments will take place on the 15th of November in Colorado, we'll probably have a decision a few days after that, if I had to guess. I mean, like I said, I know nothing about this judge out in Colorado other than what I'm reading and seeing on my own. But it would not surprise me if inside of a week, just before Thanksgiving, we get a decision on this thing. And if it goes the way I think it's going to go, and a lot of people think it's going to go, this thing is headed to the U.S. Supreme Court, which frankly, the court needs to start getting involved in some of this. I get the argument that says you don't want to get involved in a political election. I understand that. But there are bigger issues here than just Trump versus Biden. There's a lot of constitutional issues on the line here. And frankly, from my perspective, the Supreme Court is hiding behind its black robes. And some of these people are being chicken about this. But that's just my take on it. Sorry for the very dry throat this morning, folks. Oh, well, this is interesting. Did not know this. John Castro from Texas, running for president. Now, that's interesting. Huh. Did not know that. I have to look into that. Thank you very much for passing that on. I genuinely appreciate it. I will definitely take a look at that. So, that's what's... Okay. I'll take a look at it. I will take a look. Very interesting. Okay. So it is 20 minutes after 11. My name is Brian Trippett. I'm the Front Porch Conservative. We are joined this morning in chat. And hello, Randy. How you doing, brother? We're joined by Randy up in Connecticut. We're joined in by Leah Payne. We're joined in by Gypsy. We're joined in by Larry. We got some folks over on Rumble. We got folks watching. By the way, I've got to ask, for you guys who are more technical with this stuff than I am, is there a way for me to go back after my live stream, or maybe during? I have no idea. Is there any way for me to know how many people are watching on Twitter? I'll pull it up real quick just for my own curiosities, but I would love to know just how many people are watching on Twitter. Just seriously. Let's see what I got here. Let me see if I can find this real fast. Well, we may have a very healthy amount by the looks of it. That's good. I like that. Very, very healthy amount. So for all you Twitter folks out there, how you doing this morning? Glad to have you. So good to see you. All right. I may have learned something new. Well, yeah. Well, these kids these days are so much smarter than I am. So, I kind of rely on them telling old grandpa here what he needs to know. I have no idea about this stuff. Don't you know? So, yeah, we're on YouTube, we're on Twitter, we're on Rumble. If you're not a subscriber to the channel, please do me a favor. Give me a sub for YouTube. Give me a sub for Rumble. I'm trying to grow these little channels of mine and make them something very big and interesting. So, yeah, give me a sub. Give me a shot at a sub. Help a brother out here. So, let us turn our attentions once again to the nation's capital as we shift gears ever so slightly here. And something happened this week that I don't think has happened in a long time. And I've got my reservations about it because I don't like what is being done in one sense, but I do like how it's being done. Now, I know that's a very strange way to introduce this subject, but I think you're going to understand where I'm going with this here in a second. Want to pull up a headline from the New York Times. House passes aid bill for Israel, but not for Ukraine. The House-led Republican-approved $14.3 billion for Israel's war with Hamas, tying the aid to spending cuts. The Senate plans to craft its own bill that will include aid for Ukraine and Gaza. Article written by Katie Edmondson. We read the following. A divided House, I should say, on Thursday passed a Republican-written bill that would tie $14.3 billion in military aid for Israel to domestic spending cuts and provide no money for Ukraine, defying President Biden and dooming its chances in the Senate. Republicans pushed through the measure on a mostly party-line vote of 226 to 196. That's rare for an Israel aid package, which normally enjoyed broad bipartisan support. All but a dozen Democrats opposed legislation put forward by newly elected Republican Speaker Mike Johnson because it would slash President Biden's plan to bolster the IRS's tax collection efforts. This sets up a showdown in the Senate where members of both parties favor a bill that would include aid to Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan without the IRS cuts. Mr. Biden has requested such a package totaling $105 billion, and White House officials said on Tuesday that he would veto the House bill because it was limited to Israel and contained partisan poison pill offsets. Senator Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York and the majority leader, said in a speech ahead of the House vote on Thursday the Senate would not take up the House-passed proposal at all, but would instead craft its own bipartisan bill containing aid for Israel and Ukraine and humanitarian aid to Gaza. The Senate could then try and force its version of the legislation on the House and see which chamber blinks first. The resulting dispute could extend it for weeks, delaying the aid. Quote, it still mystifies me that when the world is in a crisis and we need to help Israel respond to Hamas, the GOP thought it was a good idea to tie Israel aid to a hard right proposal that will raise the deficit and is totally partisan, Mr. Schumer said. Okay, I've got some thoughts about all this. Like I said, I don't necessarily like what's being done. I do not like this aid package for Israel. Now, I consider Israel an ally of the United States, although that partnership, I think, is somewhat one-sided. By that, I mean, it seems like we're more of a partner to Israel than sometimes they are to us. Translation, we seem to give them a lot of money. I'm kind of wondering, what are we getting in return? Just saying, I'm just asking a question here. But on the whole, I think Israel is quite capable of taking care of itself. Now, depending on how we've structured this aid, if this is kind of like a lend-lease program or whatever, as opposed to just out here, take the money and run with it, okay, that's a little different too. I can understand that. So I'm not real wild about the fact we're doing this. I don't care if it's Ukraine. I don't care if it's Israel. I don't care who it is. That said, however, if you're going to do it, I love the way Mike Johnson's doing this. Separate, standalone appropriations bills. Good morning, Robert. Glad to see you too. Okay. Didn't know they had not even asked for it. All right. That's an even bigger problem. I'll grant you that. A separate standalone appropriations bill, and we are trying to find a way to pay for it. That's the first time in a long time that I've heard of the House of Representatives doing something like that. In other words, we're going to appropriate this money, and here's how we're going to offset it to pay for it. Now, what do I think is going to happen over in the Senate? Well, I think the New York Times is exactly right. They have absolutely no intention whatsoever of taking this up. And I think that Chuck Schumer is going to get cooperation from Mitch McConnell and a handful of other Republicans. They will push through a bill that will pass the 60-vote margin. And they're going to throw it back over to the House and say, all right, now what do you want to do with it? And I think, this is just my prediction, I think this is where we're going to find out what Mike Johnson's made out of. Because there's two ways this could go, at least that I can immediately think of. One, Mike Johnson caves and goes along with Schumer and McConnell. If he does that, he's got big problems on his hands. He could, on the other hand, go, no, not doing it. Which means that this money doesn't get to Israel, which they have not requested. Wow, a delay in us giving out money to somebody in such a way that they don't get their hands on it. Gee, I'm having trouble seeing the downside to that problem. I mean, call me crazy if you wish, but I don't see the downside to this. You mean he actually set up a scenario where both sides are deadlocked, no money actually goes out the door, and we're not giving money away that's not even being asked for? Now, do I think that's how it's going to work out? No, because politically speaking, right or wrong, to be on the wrong side of an Israel aid bill and you're not looking like you're helping Israel, politically, that's not going to last for very long. But on the other hand, I go back to something else. As I understand it currently right now, the Israelis have called up their reserves. They got a 350,000 man army at their disposal. They've got some of those sophisticated weapon systems in the Middle East and a military that may be second to none in the world, with only us being slightly ahead of the Israelis. Do they really need this $14.3 billion? Now, the article goes on to specify what it is that the money's for. Let me see if I can find this real quick, and I'll put it back up on the screen. Hang on. Ah, here it is. This is from a little bit further that New York Times article. The bulk of the money in the GOP measure would go toward helping Israel replenish and bulk up its weapon systems, including $4 billion for the Iron Dome and David's Sling missile defense systems. It includes $200 million for the protection of U.S. personnel and evacuation of U.S. citizens. Okay, that I'd understand. It leaves out humanitarian aid for Gaza. Oh, by the way, y'all, I found a couple or three articles about humanitarian aid for Gaza. Well, we're going to get into this in a little bit, but oh my God, this is going to blow your mind. I think it was Robert that brought up that the Hamas in Gaza were digging up water pipes that were made out of lead to use them for missiles. Robert, if I'm wrong about that, stop me, but I think you were the one that pointed it out. But I found a couple of articles about humanitarian aid as it relates to Gaza. Oh, this is going to blow your mind. And if you want a justification for why we shouldn't even be doing it, I'll show it to you here shortly. Let's go back to this article for a second. Leaves out humanitarian aid for Gaza, which Mr. Biden has requested, and many Democrats regard as crucial. Mr. Johnson said he did not attach the spending cuts for, quote, political purposes, but because the House Republicans were trying to get back to the principle of fiscal responsibility. Okay, that's what they're spending the money on. And Leanne, I absolutely wholeheartedly agree with you, dear. Let's see, what else we got this morning? Oh, Forest Mommy's in the house. Bless your heart. She's over on Rumble, that gorgeous young lady, Jessica. Ah, you are beautiful. You're welcome. You know what? Hang on a minute. If I can do this real quick. Just for grins and giggles. I normally don't do this, but you know what? I'm going to do it anyway. Because I was meaning to send you out a message anyhow. So hang on here just a second, folks. I got to do something real quick. Almost done. Hang on, folks. Anyway, yeah, Fort's mommy's in the house. We've also got Dr. OK says the Dems are stuck between a rock and a hard place here. The money is fungible. It will be used however they see fit. Yeah, Hamas steals water pipes to make missiles. They made a video to boast about it. Wow. See, I thought that was the case. So that is what's being done here. Now, I said that I've had some articles about humanitarian aid. And I got to show you this one because this is going to blow your mind. Well, let me set this up. This is from the Washington Post. It's an op-ed written by Anthony Blinken, the current Secretary of State. The headline says, "Defending Israel is essential, so is aiding civilians in Gaza." Okay. All right. Let's get a little bit further into this article because there's one part of this I want to read. Okay, here it is. Some in Congress are making the case to fund only parts of the president's request, including proposals to cut out all humanitarian assistance in Gaza. And Blinken says that would be a grave mistake. It will deepen the suffering of more than 2 million Palestinian civilians, including women and children, the elderly, people with disabilities, and other vulnerable populations who have nothing to do with Hamas's deplorable attacks. Now, on that part, I agree with it. The elderly, the women, the children, etc., they may or may not have anything to do with Hamas. I can agree with him there. It will undercut Israel's security and regional stability. I don't see how. And it will worsen problems and risks that will end up costing American taxpayers many magnitudes more over time. Now, I say I'm showing you this article to set up what you're about to see next. Okay. And keep in mind what's being argued here. We've got to provide humanitarian assistance. We've got to do it. We've got to help the women, the children, everybody else that's not directly tied to Hamas, the innocent civilians in Palestinian Gaza. Okay. There's just one little problem with that, Mr. Secretary, and it's this. This is a headline from NBC News. Hamas is hoarding vast amounts of fuel as in Gaza hospitals run low, U.S. officials say. UN officials warn that aid groups, water treatment plants, and bakeries in the enclaves are running dangerously low of fuel. Why is that, you ask? Well, according to Anna Schechter, UN officials say hospitals in Gaza are running dangerously low on fuel. Hamas is maintaining a stockpile of more than 200,000 gallons of fuel for the rockets it fires into Israel and the generators that provide clean air and electricity to its network of underground tunnels, according to U.S. officials, current and former Israeli officials and academics. Translation: the humanitarian aid that's crossing the border into Gaza, guess what? Hamas is kidnapping this stuff and using it for their own purposes. The fuel, the water, the everything we're providing, what are they doing with it? They're taking it. It's never even making it to the Palestinian people. Blinken, you bonehead. This is why you don't do it. I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry indeed that the Palestinian people are suffering at the hands of Hamas. But you're not helping this situation by giving them humanitarian aid. I understand the justification. I understand the compassion. I get it. But while Hamas runs Gaza, this stuff is never going to get to the very people that it's intended for. You don't believe that article from NBC? Take a look at this. This comes from the Times of Israel. Headline: Israeli officials, oxygen concentrators for Gaza tunnels found in aid shipments. Article written by Jacob Maged. We read the following. Israeli inspectors earlier this week uncovered several oxygen concentrators meant to aerate the tunnels operated by terror groups in Gaza. Two senior Israeli officials tell the Times of Israel, quote, they weren't for use in the hospitals, but below them. That's why they were smuggled among the boxes of cookies. One of the senior Israeli officials says, adding that the entire truck in which the oxygen concentrators were found was barred from entering Gaza. Neither official provided a photo of these oxygen concentrators in question, but they did not disclose which organization was responsible for sending the truck. Since Egypt opened up its Rafah crossing into Gaza 11 days ago, several hundred trucks filled with humanitarian aid have been able to enter Gaza following the inspections by both Egyptian and Israeli authorities. The trucks first entered Egypt, where they undergo an initial round of inspections. They are then driven into Israel through the Nitzana crossing, where they are inspected by Israeli Kogat military liaison before being sent back to Egypt and driven into Gaza through the Rafah crossing. A second Israeli official tells the Times of Israel, saying the format was agreed to after extensive talks between Israel, Egypt, and the United States. Israel thus far rejected growing calls to allow fuel, expressing concerns Hamas will divert it to power its tunnels. IDF Chief of Staff Herze Halevi said Thursday that Israel would allow fuel to enter Gaza via the Rafah crossing should it determine that the hospitals have run out of fuel. Unbelievable. This is why the U.S. needs to stay out of this completely. Let the Israelis deal with this as they need to. Dr. Schweikert and I on Wednesday night got into this discussion. And I'm really of the opinion just stay out of it. Because one of the things that kind of bugs me in all this is the argument that US politicians right now are making to the Israelis. Hey, look, you got to have a proportional response here. I mean, you can't be, excessive in your response because, the civilian casualties. Like the Israelis haven't been waging war over there for 70 years and they don't know or understand the concept of proportional response. They're on the ground over there. They're seeing what's in front of them. They're trying to defend their nation as best they know how. The U.S., from my perspective, needs to shut up and let them do what they need to do. The Israelis may be a lot of things, but they're not animals. I'd like to think the Israelis are not going to wholesale slaughter civilians in the name of defending their nation. They'll go after the people who are hurting them, which is Hamas. 200,000 gallons of fuel that Hamas is sitting on, and the hospitals, the bakeries, and the other places that desperately need it never get it. Why? Because Hamas is hoarding it. Dr. OK says on Rumble, we simply need to make sure this war stays contained. Any money we send to Gaza will get directly taken by Hamas to bolster their terrorist regime. I absolutely concur with that. Yeah, well, good point. Good point about the Palestinian people. Completely fair point. Some people would argue that they're supporting Hamas at the point of a gun, at the back of their head. But I can see exactly what you're saying, Leanne. I really can. So yeah. I found that op-ed from Blinken, and I went, "You idiot! You absolute idiot!" Hang on a second. I'm looking at something real fast. I want to see if I even want to mention this or not. Nah, I think I've made my point on this. But there is one side note to what's going on in the Congress with this aid package to Ukraine. Currently, right now, no money is going out the door, or this aid package to Israel. Excuse me, I misspoke. This aid package that got passed on Thursday for Israel. Has anybody noticed that no money is going out the door to Ukraine at the moment? That's interesting. I found an article. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Good point. Very good point. Which goes back to something that Dr. Schweikert and I talked about on Wednesday. Those who don't learn their history are doomed to repeat it. Warlords, terrorists, and crooked regimes always steal aid from their intended recipients. Brother, you are absolutely right. Absolutely right. But has anybody noticed that no money is flowing out the door to Ukraine currently? Or very, very little, let's put it that way. And I found an article, or I should say someone had mentioned it in passing, and I looked this up and I went, this is interesting. I want to show you guys this. This is in Time magazine. Nobody believes in our victory like I do inside Volodymyr Zelensky's struggle to keep Ukraine in the fight. I want to get deep into this article, and I want to point out something to you guys. Talks about the article is written by a gentleman named Simon Schuster, and I want to get about a fourth of the way into this. It's a 3,000 word piece. Schuster writes the following: it's only getting harder. 20 months into the war, about 1/5 of Ukraine's territory remains under Russian occupation. Tens of thousands of soldiers and civilians have been killed, and Zelensky can feel during his travels that a global interest in the war has slackened. So has the level of international support. Quote, the scariest thing is that part of the world got used to the war in Ukraine, he says. Exhaustion with the war rolls up along like a wave. You see it in the United States, in Europe, and we see that as soon as they start to get a little tired, it becomes like a show to them. I can't watch this rerun for the 10th time. Public support for aid to Ukraine has been in decline for months in the U.S., and Zelensky's visit did nothing to revive it. Some 41% of Americans want Congress to provide more weapons to Kiev, down from 65% in June, when Ukraine began a major counteroffensive, according to a Reuters survey taken shortly after Zelensky's departure. That offensive has proceeded at an excruciating pace with enormous losses, making it ever more difficult for Zelensky to convince partners that victory is around the corner. With the outbreak of the war in Israel, even keeping the world's attention on Ukraine has become a major challenge. There's been a lot that's been said about Ukraine vis-a-vis Israel right now. And I think the author does bring up a valid point. I think with what's going on in Israel, everybody is more or less taking their eyes off Ukraine, but I'll also argue there's a military reason for that. And it's a very valid one. It's basically reached the point where basically we've billions of dollars have been pumped into Ukraine, and the Ukrainians aren't getting anywhere. 1/5 of their territory is still occupied by Russia. And without looking at it on a map, I can almost guess which parts of Ukraine it is. It's probably the southeastern parts of Ukraine, which are ethnically Russian. which is in the end, in part, what Putin has wanted all along. So I'm not surprised that attention is being taken away from Ukraine and that politicians in the West are basically losing interest in what's going on. They're realizing all those billions of dollars going right down the drain. So much so, in fact, I found this morning and had my mind blown when I read it. How bad are things going for Ukrainians and U.S. officials and people in the West? Read it for yourself. U.S. and European officials have begun quietly talking to the Ukrainian government about what possible peace negotiations with Russia might entail to end the war. According to one current senior U.S. official and a former senior U.S. official. Folks, in simpler language, they're trying to find out from Zelensky what it would take for terms of surrender. Let me say that again. U.S. officials are feeling out Zelensky to find out what it would take to get him to surrender or get Ukraine to the negotiating table. I doubt that Zelensky would ever surrender to the Russians. But I think it's kind of reaching the point where it's becoming obvious to everybody in the West, which it should have been all along, by the way, that the Ukrainians were never going to beat the Russians. And basically all that's being done is thousands on thousands of Ukrainian soldiers, young and old, by the way, are being basically ground up into dust for the benefit of the United States, really, more than anybody else. So, there's that. Small Time Republic says, did Zelensky really think that Ukraine's social media influence would have the attention span to stand with Ukraine? That's a great point. That is an absolutely great point. And if somebody did think that, they were crazy. The best way that I liken the war between Russia and Ukraine, it's like, and I've said this analogy before, so I hope I'm not boring anybody with it. It's like two kids on a schoolyard playground. One's smaller, he's faster, and then you got another kid who's big, he's bulky, he's not as quick, but he's strong as an ox. And the advantage belongs to that little kid who could basically come in real quick, jab, 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 and then run away. And that works for a while. Unless that big old bulk of a kid, the other guy, grabs the little kid in a headlock and just won't let him go. Now, the little kid's going to flail around. He'll wave his arms, he'll wave his legs, he'll jump up and down. But basically, all that big kid's doing is just wearing him down. He's just letting that little kid just burn through all of his energy, burn through all of everything else. And then finally, the big kid just drops on the ground with the kid still in a headlock and just keeps grinding on him. Until finally the little kid's like, let me go, I can't take it anymore. You're cutting off my oxygen, you're cutting off everything else. I'm starting to see stars. I give up. That's basically what's going on here. And we're just about to that point. But unlike my analogy, which doesn't nearly have all the costs associated with it, this, thousands are going to be dead. Cities, lives are going to be destroyed. A nation is going to be left in rubble. And for what? For what? We, the United States of America, will have had a hand in destroying an Eastern European country. And for what? Oh, we had to stop Putin, man. Did you stop him? Did you really stop him? You're sitting here trying to get the Ukrainians to go to the negotiating table. Did you really stop Putin? Did you? I have a hard time believing that. Which, by the way, uh, we could have had peace negotiation. This thing could have been settled ages ago. Because if you remember, very early on, there were two different attempts to get a ceasefire and a truce between the Russians and the Ukrainians, and the West, at the hands of Boris Johnson and Joe Biden, scuttled both of those efforts. And now, 22 months later, you've got carnage in Eastern Europe. And for what? No idea. Absolutely no idea. So, anyway, it is just about noon. And by the way, I forgot to ask everybody, who are your teams playing today? My guys aren't playing until 6 o'clock tonight. We're not playing. We're playing against Appalachian State at Boone. So that'll be a pretty good game. But if you want, drop it in chat, be it on YouTube or on Rumble. Let me know who your team is playing today. So kind of got to keep up with college football as best we can. My name is Brian Trippett. I'm the Front Porch Conservative. This is Front Porch Brunch, where we gather together to talk about items in the news. It looks like the Cadets are playing East Tennessee State. Oh, I remember those games. I remember those games indeed. So we're on YouTube, we're on Rumble, we're on Twitter, we're all over the place. And we're talking about items in the news. Let's talk about this coming Tuesday. Oh, yeah, you're right. I forgot to ask Larry. I forgot to ask him if he's got a college football team. Auburn plays Vandy. That'll be a good game. That'll be a pretty good game. So let's shift gears, if we may, back to items across the country. Tuesday is election day. Now, a lot of people may or may not overlook it, but we do have some important elections coming up. And yesterday, a piece of news came out of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, which I find to be very interesting. And I thought I'd pass it on to you guys. But before I do, very important, I need to do this. If you are in District 4 in Arvada, Colorado, go vote for Jessica Fenske. If you are in District 5 in New York City, go vote for Elizabeth Galushow. Okay? Galusho, excuse me, I'm mispronouncing it. Go vote for Forrest Mommy and go vote for Elizabeth. District 4 in Arvada, Colorado. District 5 in New York City. Those two ladies are running for their respective city councils. Let's get them elected. So spread the word far and wide. Help those ladies out. So, yes. District 4, Arvada, Colorado. Jessica Fenske. Vote early, vote often. No, don't do that. But you get my point. District 5 in New York City, Elizabeth Galushow. Go vote. Go vote for her. So now, getting back to what I was doing. News came out of Kentucky. Daniel Cameron got either he's dead tied with Bashir or he's got a lead. And I think this is really, really interesting. The poll was done by Emerson, which is a pretty good pollster. I'll go through some of this. If you just take a beat on the race, they're tied at 47. If you ask them which way they lean, Cameron's got a 1-point lead. Now, I bring this up for a couple of reasons. Number one, the last time Emerson ran this poll, the Attorney General, Daniel Cameron, the Republican candidate, was down 15 points to Andy Beshear. And no, but I'd basically said, well, okay, it's Andy Beshear, he's a Democrat, he's incumbent, yada, yada, yada. And then all of a sudden, that sucker just tightened up like that. So keep an eye on that race. That one's going to be interesting Tuesday. There's a lot of races around the country. The Virginia legislature, the Republicans are trying to flip. I think it's the state Senate. They need a couple of seats to turn that total Republican control. You've got governor's races in Mississippi and Louisiana's already been decided. So it's Mississippi and Kentucky. There's a state Supreme Court race in Pennsylvania I'm keeping an eye on. And then obviously I'm keeping an eye on Jessica's race out in Colorado and Elizabeth's race up in New York City. So, and I love these off-year elections because they're a lot of fun. And the other thing is they can kind of give you an idea of where things are going politically. So I'm thinking about doing a live stream that Tuesday night. I'm thinking about it because, I want to do some of this very sort of thing for next year. And I kind of got to get at least a start of putting some kind of a system together to do it. So I may very well be live streaming Tuesday night. I don't know yet. So we'll see. But, yeah, a lot going on politically. So keep an eye on the elections. And like I said, if you're in District 5 in New York City, go vote for Elizabeth. If you're in District 4 in Arvada, Colorado, go vote. Go vote for Jessica Fenske. And Leanne brings up, yes, there is actually on Wednesday night. On Wednesday night, there is the other Republican debate, which Trump has already said he's not attending. And from what I understand, has said that he will be doing some kind of event in Florida. As some kind of counter programming. So there you go. But it's about 12 o'clock. So we're going to shift into HodgePodge Stew, which I got a few stories here I find really interesting. Let's start with some updated Trump news, since I mentioned his name. And some of it's good, some of it's bad as far as his legal woes. Start with this one. New York judge gags Trump's lawyers from discussing confidential communications of activist court clerk. Basically, everybody's getting all up in arms that the clerk is passing notes to the judge during the trial, which apparently by legal etiquette is a no-no. So the judge basically said, not only could Trump not say anything, you lawyers can't say anything about it. But not all is not necessarily bad for Trump. We have the following. In the D.C. court, appeals court temporarily lifts Trump's gag order as he fights restrictions on free speech. So the difference is the New York City case is just that. It's a New York City case. This is one of the case that the AP is talking about is the one that Jack Smith, who we here affectionately refer to as Jack Boot, old Jack Boot Smith brought a case at the District of Columbia, and Judge Tanya Shutkin put a gag order on Trump. Trump's lawyers immediately appealed it, and the circuit court has put a hold on the gag order until they can have a hearing about this. But there is one other piece of news as it relates to Trump, and this to me is the big one. Take a look at this. Judge Cannon will delay DOJ's trial against Trump and seize documents. Quote, Pretrial deadlines temporarily stayed pending order to follow. Now, if you're wondering what this one is about, let me refresh your memory. Remember, Jack Smith has two different cases going in two different circuits. One of them is the D.C. circuit, and the other is the documents case down in Florida. Well, the judge has just decided as of yesterday that they're going to delay the trial. Now, I say this is important primarily because this one may have influence on everybody else. Now, do I think that Judge Cannon is going to call up Judge Shutkin up in D.C. and say, hey, Tanya, look, why don't we just let the voters decide this? I don't think that's going to happen. But I think in the court of public opinion, this has got the potential to go a long way to help Trump. Because anything that Shutkin does going forward in that D.C. circuit case up there is going to be looked at exactly for what it is. It's election interference. At least Cannon's willing to say, look, we got a presidential election coming up. This guy's probably going to be the nominee of his party. Why don't we let the voters decide this? And then we'll let the legal system take its course. I could be wrong, but let's see what happens. So you got that going on. So another story that I found that I thought would be interesting for HodgePodge Stew. Y'all heard about Sam Bankman-Fried? Well, guess what? Found guilty on all 7 criminal fraud counts. Faces 115 years in prison. He's the founder of FTX, which is cryptocurrency. Jury found Sam Bankman-Fried guilty on all 7 criminal counts. FTX founder faces a minimum of 115 years in prison. 31-year-old son of 2 Stanford legal scholars and graduate of MIT, was convicted of wire fraud and conspiracy to commit fraud against FTX customers and against Alameda Research lenders, conspiracy to commit securities fraud, conspiracy to commit commodities fraud against FTX investors, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. Sam Bankman-Fried has perpetrated one of the biggest financial frauds in American history. While the cryptocurrency industry might be new and players like Sam Bankman-Fried might be new, this kind of corruption is as old as time. This case has always been about lying, cheating, and stealing. We have no patience for it. I bring this up to show you a tweet. And I put this out for your consideration. Sam Bankman-Fried, the now convicted criminal mastermind of one of the 2 largest frauds ever committed, donated $5.2 million to Joe Biden's 2020 campaign. Will Joe Biden give that money back? Charlie, don't hold your breath. So you got that going on. Oh, by the by, did you guys hear about what happened to Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City? I'm going to play something for you. This is a Twitter video. It runs about 17 seconds. So Adams, along with a bunch of other Democrat mayors from around the country, were on their way to D.C. to talk to Joe Biden. Watch this.
We headed to D.C. to meet with our congressional delegation and the White House to address this real issue, the asylum and migrant issue in our city, and we'll keep you updated as the day goes.
So, he's on his way down to D.C. to talk to the White House about this problem with immigration. Well, that's all well and good, except he had one little problem just before the meeting started. The FBI raided his fundraiser up in New York City. And people say that Joe Biden is anyway. Yeah, I think Joe Biden was sending a message to Eric, be like, hey, you, mind your P's and Q's. don't tell me how to take care of immigration. I'll tell you how you're going to take care of immigration. But that's just me. I could be wrong. And I've got one last story for HodgePodge Stew. And it has to do with the passing of Bob Knight. Get myself adjusted here. As many of you know, Bob Knight passed away this week at the age of 83. And there's a lot of things you can say about Bob Knight. All of them would probably be equally true. He was definitely a man of a different generation, a different kind of coach of a different generation. But for everything bad that could be said about Bob Knight, there were a lot of things about him that were good. And I want to play, yeah, really. I want to play a clip. And this is from Sage Steele when she was still with ESPN. And if you really want an idea of what Bob Knight was really like, take a listen to this.
And I was an intern in the athletic department in Bloomington, and I was finishing something up at Assembly Hall, and I was walking out the front doors of Assembly Hall, and I looked to my right, and Coach Knight and all the coaches are coming down the ramp, and my heart stopped, and I thought, oh my gosh, for all these years I've been waiting and dying to see if Bob Knight remembered my dad, who was a football player at Army. He broke the color barrier there, and so I thought, I was scared, and I thought, I got to try it, and I went up, and I was like, hi, Coach, and he looked at me, and he goes, can I help you? And I said, well, and I started talking fast. I said, well, my name is Sage. Put his arm around me. He goes, slow down. I said, okay, deep breath. I said, my name is Sage, and I wanted to know if you remembered my dad. He goes, who's your father? I said, well, he played football there when you were there. His name is Gary Steele. And he stopped in his tracks, Angela. He looked at me and he goes, Gary Steele, 6'6", 220 pounds, from Levittown, Pennsylvania, Manlius Prep School, tight end for Army, number 82, the best GD athlete that campus has ever seen. Yeah, I know your dad. What about him? And I'm like, this is 1995. And at that, he was looking back 30 years. He remembered my dad's height, his weight, everything about him. And he goes, your dad was a great man. You tell him I said hi. And I was like, okay. And he hugged me and he walked away. And I turned to go to the payphone to call my dad and say, oh my goodness, Bob Knight remembered you, Dad, 30 plus years later. And he goes, hey, by the way, and I look back, he goes, ask your dad, what the hell kind of name is Sage? I was like, okay, Bob
that is
Knight,
perfect, what you would expect
right?
for Coach to say.
He had to remind me, I'm nice and I'm soft. I don't want anybody to see that, but I'm still Bob Knight. And it was one of the best moments of my life as a fan. And the fact that he remembered my father and was so kind to me, I'm so grateful for that moment. And that's the real Bob Knight that nobody on the outside really chooses to understand.
I play that for a lot of reasons. One, like I said, I think if you really want to get an idea of what Bobby Knight was really like, past all the guff and the tantrums and the everything else, that little 2-minute clip does a whole lot to tell you about what Bobby Knight really was. Ever since his passing, there have been articles written about him. And like I said, there's a lot of things you can say about Bobby Knight. All of them be equally true. But what most people don't know about the man is his generosity, which he never wanted publicized. He loved his players. He loved the University of Indiana. In spite of everything that happened at the end, he cared about kids, cared about his community, and he cared about trying to make young men the best they could be. And like I said, his style of coaching and his style of teaching, the world changed around him. He never changed. And his passing from the world leaves it just a little less interesting. But anyway, it's about 15 minutes after 12, and I know you guys have got lives, and so do I. So my name is Brian Trippett. This has been Front Porch Brunch. Thank you guys, as always, for stopping by. We're going to be back this week with, here's a Bobby Knight story. 15 years. Yeah, it would have been about, 67, 68 years old. He was still still an intimidating guy. We're going to be back this week with more videos. I'm going to do some live streams this week. I just don't know when yet. So we'll see. Thank you guys very much for stopping by. And remember the words of that great philosopher. It's faster horses, younger lovers, older whiskey, and more money. We'll see you later.